What is going on, my rebel winners? This is the XRP Scum here, and I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Bitcoin is a store of value. That's the lie that is going to cost you a fortune in 2026. In a high-velocity economy, static weight is dead weight. If your assets aren't moving, they aren't earning. Today, we're going to take a look at the great capital rotation and how it is moving away from the Bitcoin vault into the XRP Ledger. Stick around and we will break this down. And then if you wait until the end, we will go over and debunk a lot of misinformation about lies about XRP that the Bitcoin community has spread. If any of you tech gurus out there have ever tried to do some research into blockchain technology and XRP, I'm sure that finding mainstream headlines that explicitly say billionaires are selling Bitcoin for XRP is rare, because elite movements are usually quiet until after the fact. However, the current data from early 2026 shows a massive divergence in institutional fund flows that supports this narrative, including one from the European Business Magazine. I'm going to read this off to you guys, okay? This is a quote, well, a couple different stats and quotes from the European Business Magazine. In December of 2025, while Bitcoin ETFs saw outflows of 1.09 billion during a market correction, XRP funds continued to absorb capital. The narrative. This indicates that smart money is no longer treating XRP as just another altcoin following Bitcoin's lead. They are treating it as a distinct institutional asset class with its own value proposition. And the source is from this article called, it's going to sound a little misleading, but I looked into it and it feels like one of those attention-grabbing headlines, but then they actually talk very positively about XRP. But the article, if you guys want to look this up, is called "Why XRP Won't Move Despite Record Capital Backing" from the European Business Magazine in January of 2026. So the second citing here is Standard Chartered is one of the most vocal institutional backers. Their digital asset head, Jeffrey Kendrick, set an $8 target for XRP by the end of 2026. The reasoning is the rotation isn't just about price, it's about the Clarity Act, scheduled for Senate markup in early 2026. And this allows banks to integrate XRP directly into treasury operations. And the quote that I will quote, it says, XRP is no longer a speculative altcoin facing existential legal risk. It's increasingly viewed as infrastructure for the next generation of financial plumbing. Here we have a lot of these institutions that are not necessarily trying to chase a green candle going all the way up. They're not trying to do those things. They are shooting for higher goals. We have big institutions, and Ripple is just crushing it everywhere. So they will publicize or show on the spotlight what Ripple is doing, but they will fail to mention about how Ripple's on-demand liquidity service works, for example. And the reason why they want to stay silent about a lot of those things is because they don't necessarily want you to hold the asset. Where Bitcoin is a store of value. What do you think they're doing with the Clarity Act? It's almost kind of silly to argue that they're not upgrading the financial system at this point, if you look at what they're doing. Anyone that denies that that's going on is not looking at a lot of these bills that are being passed and tracking the progress of all those on the certified government websites. And I'm just talking about basic research here. So if you look at it, you see that Ripple is board of the World Economic Forum. What's happening right now is, because we've already stated this in the video, but I'll go ahead and summarize. It's been a while since I've talked about this stuff. We know that Rosie Rios she stated in an interview, and if you don't know who Rosie Rios is, her name is on the $100 bill, and she was the U.S. Treasurer, 46th, I believe, U.S. Treasurer. Could be wrong on that specific detail, but she was saying in an interview, as she moved away from that she's working with a company, working with the next evolution of money. And those were her exact words. If you start connecting all of the different pieces here, but let's get back to our research. The Crypto Native Bank Charter. So there's a conditional approval that happened with the OCC in December of 2025. Let's go over that. In a move that shocked the industry in late 2025, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the OCC, granted Ripple conditional approval for the Ripple National Trust Bank, the RNTB. This allows Ripple to offer regulated custody and reserve management for the RLUSD stablecoin directly, which is their stablecoin. Institutional grants like Citadel Securities and Fortress Investment Groups participated in a $500 million private funding round for Ripple at a $40 billion valuation. These are the billionaire entities moving into the ecosystem. And the source for that is digital assets, large-scale product, and investment setting up for 2026. This was an article from the Crypto Native Bank. Grayscale's end of the 4-year cycle theory. And Grayscale Research recently published that their 2026 outlook, which challenges the idea that everything revolves around Bitcoin's halving. That's what everyone's talking about. But they argue that 2026 marks the end of Bitcoin-centric cycles. Institutional investment is shifting towards public blockchain technology with operational necessity. XRP's role as a bridge asset makes it an operational necessity, whereas Bitcoin as a scarce commodity and, as I stated before, a store of value, and it's pretty much isolated to that use case. In a high utility environment, capital moves from the warehouse to the engine, which is XRP. Now we talk about the on-chain whale divergence, where Bitcoin whales have been accumulating during recent pullbacks. Exchange-held XRP balances have plummeted to 7-year lows. So this is all data as of January 2026. And retail is selling their XRP out of frustration. But ETF custodians are locking up the supply. When supply on exchange drops while institutional custody rises, it indicates a massive handoff from weak hands to the institutional vaults. Not just their hands. So, let's wrap this up here. You might see Bitcoin whales buying the dip, but look at the custody data. XRP supply on exchanges is at a 7-year low. Why? Because while retail is bored and it's not hip anymore, firms like Citadel and Standard Chartered, yes, those guys, are positioning for the 2026 Clarity Act. They aren't looking for a pump and dump scheme. They're not chasing the red candle. They're not chasing the green candle. They're not worried about none of that. They are looking to own the plumbing of the new global reserve system. Alright guys, it's time for Bitcoin Maxi spread misinformation. For the first claim, the skeptic. XRP is centralized because Ripple controls the UNL and the majority of the supply. Here's my rebuttal to that. Centralization is a spectrum. For a bank, a completely lawless chain is a bug, not a feature. They need gateways to satisfy KYC, which is Know Your Customer, and AML laws. XRP offers institutional decentralization. It's decentralized enough to be secure, but structured enough to be legal. The skeptic says, if XRP is so fast and efficient, its velocity will be so high that nobody needs to hold it, meaning the price will never go up. I'm sorry that you're so wrong about that, but here's my rebuttal. To bridge $10 billion in a single minute without slippage or volatile price swings, you will need a massive market cap. For XRP to function as the world's bridge, and if you look this information up, that is what they are positioning themselves to do. That is their goal. That is their business strategy and goal, to become this very thing. So this is just the relevancy to where we're at. It's part of the requirements for them to actually become successful, and a lot of indicators are suggesting heavily that they are slowly climbing and they are becoming successful. So for XRP to function as this bridge, the world's asset, it must be a high value, or the pipe is not big enough to handle the flow of global trade. That's just point blank. The skeptic says Bitcoin has a hard cap and proof of work security. XRP is just printed by a company. This is where the misinformation comes into play. Gold is scarce, but you don't pay for coffee with it. Bitcoin is the volt, but the world needs a wire. We aren't arguing that Bitcoin will go to zero. That's not logical. We're arguing that static wealth is losing market share to produce wealth. You can't build global DEX on a vault door, which DEX stands for decentralized exchange, meaning you can take one asset and transfer it into another, which is what XRP was designed to do. The skeptic says if Ripple has its own stablecoin, RLUSD, why would anyone use XRP? They'll just use the stablecoin. My rebuttal to that is RLUSD is the dollar. But how do you swap RLUSD for yen stable or euro CBDC? Instantly, I might add. How do you do this instantly? Well, you will need a neutral, non-fiat bridge that doesn't carry the baggage of any one nation's debt. That is what XRP was designed to do. That is XRP's job. It's the base pair for the entire internet of value. All this is just for informational purposes only. Nothing I say should ever, in any scenario, and under any pretenses, under any context, be considered or represented in any capacity as financial advice. That's all I got. Be sure to force choke that like button and lightsaber slash that subscribe. See you in the next one.
Tune into the XRP scum. Facts over fluff, where the real ones rise. Never enough, fast and start, unchained and true. XRP forever. The future runs through you.